Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Fratello Talks. I'm your host Nacho, and today I'm joined by
Thomas
and
RJ.
And we're going to be talking about how to buy a vintage watch, giving some advice from experience, mostly buying, but also selling vintage watches. But of course, before we do that, let's get into wrist check. RJ, what is on your wrist today?
I'm not wearing a vintage watch.
Oh,
No, I'm wearing my Omega Constellation Globemaster in rose gold or Sedna gold.
Sedna gold, right. Yeah. It's looking a bit less Sedna than one might expect, right? How long have you had the watch?
So it's, when did I get it? 2017, so 8 years, almost, in March. And so the Sedna, the rose gold gets yellow after a while.
Yeah, over time.
And I think with over time and with Sedna gold, it takes a little bit longer. So it's still rose gold, but less rose than it used to be.
For sure.
It really shows when you look at the rotor collar.
Yeah, we'll put in a little bit
collar.
of footage of that at the wrist check so people can see. But no, it's a good looking watch. Really cool.
Yeah, I like it. It's 39 millimeters, which is fine. It's a little bit thick, but so am I. So no, it's good. I like it. Yeah.
Perfect. It's a perfect match. Thomas, what is on your wrist today?
I'm also not wearing a vintage watch.
Guys.
Yeah, sorry.
Guys.
Sorry. Yeah, you'll have to make up for it. But
yeah, we'll get to that.
I'm back to old habits after a very weird departure last time.
Let's not
back to the...
Let's not talk about that.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I'm back to the VPC Type 37 HW in Dove Gray.
Very nice. Yeah, I'm partial to that watch as I own it myself. So cool. No complaints here. Nice. Yeah, and I'm wearing, as you hinted, a vintage watch. This is my 1961 Seamaster, whose reference completely escapes me now. I think it starts with 146 something. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's a vintage one. And yeah, I thought I would come prepared for the topic of the day. I think for you guys it was a bit of a short notice for you, but
I noticed
yes
that you didn't shave.
No. I always shave right before the podcast day.
Oh yeah, exactly.
No, not really. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But hey, cool. So let's get into the topic. We've all bought. We're recording this on Monday.
Yeah,
usually
true.
We record on Wednesday. We're a bit. We're not ready.
I have a new hobby, by the way. It's not really a hobby. Shaving is not a... Perhaps for some it might be a hobby.
Here we go.
But I ditched my Gillette throwaway stuff.
Oh, did you get a proper razor?
Yeah, not a folding blade because that's a bit too tricky.
Can't fly with that.
But I bought the security razor, the double-sided one.
Safety razor.
Safety razor. I bought a Mühle,
Yeah. Oh, I have it too.
Yeah, from
Nice.
made in stainless steel. Because most of them are
Chromed.
Chromed,
Yeah,
and I didn't want that, so I bought a RVS or stainless steel. But it's nice with a how do you say, the brush?
Yeah,
made out of
badger
hair.
Yeah,
badger.
but silver hair one.
Okay.
Yeah, Omega. The brush.
Oh yeah, because they do
like a horn.
But not Omega, the watch brand, right? More,
No.
It's
It has
Omega.
nothing to do
There's
with
also
that.
a knife brand.
Yeah, exactly.
Omega.
But it's nice.
And did you get a nice scent of old man scented soap?
Yeah, can't remember the brand, but it's nice in like a wooden bowl. It's really nice. And the knives, as such, you can use them 4 or 5 times, I think. But they're like 10 cents each.
Yeah.
So it's really
definitely
in
works
the
out
end
better
cheaper than Gillette.
Did you cut yourself?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I started doing so from December onwards, and the first times you cut yourself and you only shave in one direction.
Yeah.
But now I can shave in both directions without cutting myself. But it's the angle that is important. You have to keep the skin a bit straight, and it's nice.
It's ridiculously smooth when you.
It's nice.
Done. Yeah.
But the experience is also nice.
Yeah.
I'll have to try it sometime. I never usually wet shave. Anyway,
It's like, we like making coffee the old-fashioned way.
Exactly.
Yeah, or wearing a mechanical watch.
I'm a shaving barista as well.
Yeah.
Shaving barista. Perfect. Yeah, just when you thought we were going to tell people about buying vintage watches, it's actually this is a shaving podcast now. No, let's get back to the topic. So buying vintage watches, there's some pitfalls out there. We know about them. We've given advice on for people on how to buy, sell, and trade their watches with no regrets before, but we thought we'd get into no regrets. We thought we'd get into it with vintage watches specifically because it's they're popular, and it can be a little bit of a minefield if you don't know how to navigate it properly. And I think that with just some words of advice, people can basically go a long way. And of course, results may vary, but we're going to give some advice. Does anything come to mind specifically or right away when it comes to vintage watches? Either something that you yourself personally do, or that you would give as advice to a newcomer?
It's a little bit always the same. So I think most important rule is buy the seller. Yeah. I think, but we should look past that, because I think that's the obvious one.
Of course.
Homework is really important. So I collect Speedmasters, as you know, but also some vintage Constellations. And it's you really need to compare a lot of pictures. You need to compare a lot of what's out there, what's being written, what's in books, what's in print, what's online, from auction houses. I think that's very important. But I also notice that sometimes if you see a dial that you can't find elsewhere, it doesn't mean it's fake or redial or reprint. Man, they made so much stuff in the past. It's unbelievable. So it's not always a matter of. In other words, I think too often people say too quickly that something is fake or not original. Yeah. So it's just a very time-consuming effort to buy vintage.
It's a rabbit hole, right? You have to kind of also enjoy the process of going down it and doing your research. And I think that's a good piece of advice. Is like, you can never do too much research. You can never spend too much time. Well, some might beg to differ, but you can never spend too much time reading thousands and thousands of forum posts that are already out there. Right. If you're looking at vintage Omegas, go to the Omega forums. Right. Yeah. It's a good resource. If you have questions, ask people. Usually they're very happy to help you. It's that kind of thing. Like there's a ton of information out there in books, but also in online.
And if you don't feel that comfortable, I think you should start buying the more affordable things first. See how it wears, how it feels, if it's something for you.
Yeah.
Rather than spending a lot of money on a vintage, very expensive vintage Rolex or Patek. Yeah. I think I would start a little bit more on the safe side to also find out if it's something for you. If you enjoy doing the research and trying to dodge the snake pit a little bit. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, the small idiosyncrasies as well of wearing a vintage watch, where you might suddenly walk outside and get a fogged up crystal and go, oh, okay, that's not good, right? Things that you might not expect if you're used to only wearing brand new watches.
Yeah. Well, with vintage, I also feel that there are different, grades in how far you want to take it. I think Thomas is a little bit more purist than I am in that regard. So, for example, I would not mind if a crystal has been replaced or gaskets have been replaced, movement parts have been replaced, as long as it has been done with like authentic parts. It doesn't even need to be like time correct, but authentic parts. Because just like buying a vintage car, you want to have the head gasket changed at some point. And for me, also the technical condition of a watch is in the end perhaps even more important than the visual condition of a watch. That said, I also don't want a dial that looks like complete rubbish because it's not even patina anymore, but just rotted away.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's also very personal about what you like in a certain watch.
Yeah, I think it also makes sense to sort of find your place with regards to this sort of purism. Like back in my days as a dealer at Amsterdam Watch Co, we often had clients who were sort of following these articles about how to buy a vintage watch, but they followed them to the letter, like as if it was the Bible of buying a watch. So they'd be like, oh, but this part may have been replaced, or I want precisely this and that configuration, otherwise it's not worth anything. And they completely sort of forgot, like, but what does it do to you? Does it put a smile on your face?
Exactly.
Do you like it? Like, you can be completely snobby about whether a case has ever been polished, but if you intend to wear the watch every day, I mean, who cares? You're going to put a scratch or two in it, and it doesn't really matter. If you're going to be hunting for super rare museum quality watches, then sure, go be a purist. But sometimes you have to be a little bit more lenient. Like, am I really going to be this specific about a watch that I just intend to wear and just intend to enjoy?
For sure.
Like, there's a line there, I think, and it can be. You can actually harm your own enjoyment of the hobby if you're going to be completely sort of by the book and and completely purist about it.
You will probably end up by buying really nice stuff like museum condition watches, but I think then you also are too afraid to wear them, basically, because every scratch or ding or whatever will hurt you. And that, to me, that's not worth it. I can imagine that to some people that's worth it, and they want to have their watches in museum condition and perhaps not wear it. But for me personally, I like to wear my watches, even if it's vintage. And then I rather have one that I can wear safely outside without fogging up or whatever.
That's it. I think you have to kind of do a little bit of introspection and find what kind of collector you are. If you are the guy hunting the sort of the rarest of the rare, pure, great condition that may or may not exist, may or may not be out there, then of course it's going to be maybe a case of less is more, and really like doing the research and hunting stuff. But you might also be a little bit more like, at least like myself, where you just want to experience a certain kind of watch, and then you sort of find more of a comfort zone in terms of price, and then within that price window, you try to find the best that suits your budget, and then in that case, you can still take your time and find things that are suddenly actually quite good value for what it is, but of course that would never really be museum-worthy pieces with everything in the best possible condition. However, you can then still get a lot of enjoyment out of it and save quite a bit of money in that case, right? I mean,
I think speaking of money and budget, I think it's also good to try not to aim for the cheapest of what you're looking for.
Yeah,
so,
I agree.
For instance, let's say you want a vintage Rolex, and you have, a budget that would allow for a really good Oyster Perpetual or a really bad Datejust, then I'd say just go for a really good Oyster Perpetual or keep saving. Yeah. Because sort of bargain hunting in the vintage world
doesn't work.
Oh, it doesn't work. No, it tends to lead to bad stuff. I had this email just this weekend from a guy who was like, "Oh, sorry, can I send you this image of a Datejust that I have my eye on? It's quite cheap, and should I buy it?" And he sent a picture of the back where the case back was removed. The entire thread was just eaten away from corrosion. Yeah. I told him, "You're never going to get that sealed up properly again. So please just don't go bargain hunting. It's really not a good idea with vintage watches."
So you have to find the type of collector you are, and you also have to find like where your budget lies, and then know your limitations, right? If you say, okay, I have 1,000 euros to spend on a vintage watch, don't try and find a vintage Rolex Oyster Perpetual, because it's just not going to be enough. Yeah. Maybe consider some of the Seamasters like this one, which you can have for around 1,000 or a little bit less, still in decent condition. And then the other thing to note is like you have to, I think, like a little bit of awareness as to serviceability is good, because there's some movements and some watches out there that just, in a way, you have to kind of taper your expectations. Like you buying a project watch, I think like with probably people who buy,
I have many of those, and it always turned out to be a very expensive exercise.
It remains a project
for
watch,
a long
right?
time as well.
I think it's a lot like when people buy a project car and you go, I'm going to be driving this in no time, and then suddenly it's like 10 years later you're still tinkering at that engine because as you're working on it, other things deteriorate. So sometimes it is better to just spend a little bit more and get something that's going to work now, or that just needs a basic service. Obviously, watches are sealed and you can't look inside typically. So when you buy, you're always taking some sort of a risk. At least if you, like me, are not afraid of buying from largely reputable places such as Vinted or eBay Kleinanzeigen. No, they're fine places to buy watches. But if you really want to be sure that you're not going to run into trouble, then of course going to places like Amsterdam Vintage Watches or even some of the certified Chrono 24 stuff can be.
I always want to see the movement, basically, because if I see that the dial has a little bit of corrosion or whatever, I also want to see the movement. Yeah. How that is looking. So for me, that's very important. Yeah. Another note I want to make is that also in the past, Grandpa speaks. When I started to collect watches in the late 90s, it was not that strict altogether. So my first Speedmaster is a 321, a 145 or 12. When I bought it, I just wore it every day. So the bezel got dense, the crystal was damaged, whatever. So I had the bezel replaced and so on and so on, with original parts, but not time correct.
Yeah.
And that was just the thing that people did in those years. I think it's only from the last 10, 15 years that people are so precise and so, like you say, they follow these guidelines as some kind of a Bible thingy, which makes it also hard on themselves. Well, in the past, these watches, they got serviced, parts were replaced and so on. And I tried to correct it. So I bought the correct bezel again, correct, I don't know what for the Speedmaster. That became a very expensive exercise. And 20, 25 years ago, I didn't care. It was just a nice 3-2-1.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
So I think you also need to take that into consideration, that these things happened to these watches in the 70s, 80s, 90s, when it was all not that important.
No, you just wanted to have a cleaner bezel. Like if your bezel was scratched, you go, I want a new one.
These days, with a lot of these watches, whether it's a Submariner or a GMT or a Calatrava or a Speedmaster, it also has become a monetary thing. That if you have the correct dial, if you have the correct bezel, it translates into this value in your Excel sheet.
Yeah.
And I think that's true, because original is nicer, it's better. But on the other hand, it also took away a little bit of the fun. That everything is now like translated into a certain value with these watches.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at certain watches, they are still not touched by this way of thinking. And those are nice to collect.
For sure.
I feel.
For sure. Yeah, you just find a nice example, and whether it's 100% accurate, 100% correct, and whatever, it's maybe that's if you do make that a priority for yourself, then it's just you only have yourself to blame for the limitation that imposes upon your collecting and upon your enjoyment of the watches, right? Yeah. But again, it's like a very subjective thing. Like you have to find what you're after and a bit of that threshold. And then going back to sort of the price consideration, you also can if you are ever in a position where you go, am I going to take a risk on something? I think it always has to be on money that you're willing to lose. It's a little bit like if you're taking a gamble, it should be like a gamble. It should be like never bid on something where you go, oh, if this is right, if this is the real watch, then I could stand to make so much money. Like never be drawn into a situation like that, right? Because I think like probably a lot of people have lost a lot of money thinking that something might be this great opportunity, and then they get it, and it turns out to be a bit of a problematic thing that's definitely not worth what they thought it might have been. So in a way, it's when taking risks, don't do it often, and if you do, then only take risks you're comfortable with.
That you can afford, basically.
Yeah, money you're willing to throw away, right? That's
exactly. And I think what's also important to consider is serviceability or repairability. I'm not sure if that's a word, but make sure you still can source parts, or that your watch find a good watchmaker first, and make sure that he or she can source the parts necessary for these watches.
For sure.
I bought a very old Constellation once with caliber 503 or 505, can't remember. I think it was early 2000s. And it took my watchmaker like 2 years to find a certain movement part for that, because it was just not there anymore. And that can be very frustrating.
I had the same with a Tissot chronograph, where the pusher mechanism was then broken, and the watchmaker had to basically take an off-the-shelf part for the pusher and adjust it and everything, and it turned into something that was far more expensive than expected. And it was because it was one of those where it was like, oh wow, this is a really good deal. Oh, it's just missing a pusher. I'm sure that's easy enough to replace. And then suddenly it turns into a couple hundred euros extra on top of the repair, and then you think, at some point, you then have to go like, is this actually worth it? You know.
What I do like about Longines, not sure if you have been there to the
no, I haven't.
Manufacture. They have a vintage workshop. They call it Atelier Vintage. I don't know. It's a vintage workshop they have within the Manufacture, and they can basically restore any Longines watch. It's amazing. They have a huge archive with parts, whether it's dials, movement parts, hands, whatsoever. They can really restore properly. It's so nice to see, and they have the extract system that works properly, and then it might become more expensive than what it's worth or what you paid for it or the market price. But if you have a nice Longines and you want to be in super nice original condition, I think it's interesting to that a brand supports this and does this these days.
That's also a good consideration. Is the brand still around? Is the brand still around? And has the brand been around? Because I think that sometimes, say you buy a vintage Aquastar, and Aquastar, the brand is around now, but it's a rebirth version of Aquastar.
Yeah.
So that brand disappeared for a while, probably sold off a bunch of parts. I'm not sure, right? This is just a sort of hypothetical. But if you try to source parts for those watches, whether it's a dial or a bezel insert or whatever, chances are you won't find it. You'll be looking for a donor watch, that kind of thing. Whereas brands like Omega and Longines and Tissot, they've sort of continued to have to exist and do have this backlog of parts.
Where a brand is able to restore or repair vintage pieces. Yeah. I think Rolex does that, Omega does that, Longines, but also Jaeger-LeCoultre. And they told me once that if they don't have the parts, they can make it again. Of course, that comes at a certain price.
Of course,
they can do it.
Yeah,
but this is also, I think, it tracks back to the bargains again. Like, especially if you're new, if you just go to any, I don't know, vintage stuff website, you'll find these sort of unknown brands or these sort of exotic things, and they can be like dirt cheap.
Yeah.
But it really pays to do your homework on like what sort of caliber is in there, and you know, where might I source parts. It can really be a much better idea.
Yeah.
Like if you're really at the super entry level, like try and reach for like a vintage Seamaster, for instance. That's just much more likely to be serviceable than some exotic thing,
or a Tavan, or a Lip, or a whatever, and like insert vintage watch.
And they produce so many of those Seamasters and Constellations, for example, that there's always one that is in good condition.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. For sure. That's the thing. Like with a watch like this, you could probably find, I don't know, 100 of them for sale online in different places, whether it's eBay, Chrono24, forums, whatever, and then it's up to you what you select, right? Like you
what you want to spend, basically.
Yeah.
And
do
then,
you want that museum quality sort of new old stock piece that has the sticker or whatever it is on the case back, or are you okay with going for something that's you know, on the mid range, where you basically then get a good watch? It might need a service. It's still running well, but it's maybe not in the most pristine condition. I mean, obviously this one has a little bit of like patina on the dial, and it's you know, it's not perfect, but I still really love it. So you know, it's, you kind of have to find your preference there and go for it. But I think cheaping out is never the solution, because you're always potentially gonna end up regretting it in some way. Also,
just keep in mind that every 5 years you're gonna have to service it. And unless you have some handy neighbor with a shed, you're gonna probably pay like $400 at least.
Yeah, that's it.
So you have to wonder, like, is it worth to do that every 5 years or so? So if you're gonna buy some bargain for 300,
it accumulates over a number of years to a very expensive.
Exactly.
Yeah, especially you have many of them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. No, cool. Is there anything else that you guys would want to talk about here? Like,
there's the really basic stuff, like just sort of the things like if an advertisement for a watch says checked by our watchmaker,
it is not surfaced.
No, it's not surfaced.
No,
that's usually
okay.
Yeah. You know, that sort of stuff is just. I mean, you need to know the jargon a little bit, and that's the sort of thing like. And if it has been surfaced, like when, and do they have a receipt of it? And is there anything that was done to it?
Yeah.
Have a look at conditions, whether it matches, like indeed when the dial is super clean, but the movement is super dirty, like that sort of stuff. Always, it's a bit, you know, things tend to be a bit dangerous when you see such mismatches.
Yeah.
So, but that's just the basics, and we've written several articles on that sort of stuff on Fratello.
For sure. Yeah, but I think it's good to go over some of those potential pitfalls, right? Like if you're looking at a watch and suddenly one of the hands looks really, really new, it's a bit like, that's probably been replaced, or you know, sometimes if you're curious as to whether something has been polished or not, I mean, you're never gonna know 100% unless you know you really have the knowledge to look at something and be able to say. But
I don't mind if something is polished, but it needs to be done properly.
Yeah, it can't be like rounded off to where the spring bar hole is like almost where the case starts curving, that kind of thing. But hey, Google image like the watch, and
you see a change
new one.
You see a change there because I remember a couple of years ago, vintage dealers were very eager to label watches as unpolished.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I always see they look unpolished to us, but you never know. Which is, I think, a decent way of putting it. Like it has all the meat and it has the sharp lines. Well, good. But you can't say. It's impossible to say usually.
And also if a watch has been worn for in the previous 50 years, it was polished by your cuffs.
Yeah,
so you'll definitely see some. I don't mind polishing again, but the shape needs to be like original and no angles being cut off or polished away or and I think also the brushed parts or the polished parts that also need to be in how it should be. Because sometimes you have this watch fair here in the Netherlands. Sometimes you see watches that supposed to be brushed and are polished. And it's
that's bad. I think it is worth comparing to online, like just looking up how the watch would have looked. Sometimes you can't get an image of what it looked like new, but you can get close to it. And
what you also could do is look at vintage advertising to compare
that as well.
And there is this Swiss magazine called Europastar, and they have a digital archive. It's not for free. I think it's 100 Swiss francs a year. But there you can look in their archive goes back decades and decades. So you can see a lot of old advertising as well. It's quite interesting to compare to those types of pictures as well. And keep in mind that some of the watches advertised never made it to production. So
that's it.
So not everything there is 100% as well. But at least you need comparison material.
For sure. So I think, it's a matter of educating yourself, taking your time, making sure to really like find yourself a seller who's willing to talk to you and willing to answer your questions. And, I think we can all agree that like asking for an extra photo or two is not something that's like out of the ordinary. And most people should be more than happy to provide that, right? You see a listing without a picture of the movement. If you ask for one, typically they'll be fine just providing it. So it's good to ask questions, not just to the seller, of course. I think it's also great to rely on the community that's out there, the fan base for vintage watches, which is, enormous. And essentially online, you have many ways to access it, whether it's on brand specific forums or your country's local forums. Always good to ask questions.
Yeah, and I think if you studied long and hard enough on vintage watches, perhaps it's not the best. Trust your gut.
That also.
I think that's also important.
Once you have enough experience, right? There's lessons you'll only learn probably by making some mistakes. I think it's also like I said, don't be too afraid of making mistakes, but obviously don't make any mistakes that are going to cost you an arm and a leg. It is worth learning. And if you've bought like a fairly cheap watch and suddenly it runs well for a couple of days, and then after a couple of days it stops running altogether, and you go, okay, that's annoying, but that is how it is. And I learned that lesson many years ago as a student when I was buying cheaper watches, just because I was fascinated by them being mechanical and this kind of thing. But
it's not a bad thing to pay leergeld, learning money. But make sure it's limited.
Exactly. Don't end up on the podium.
Exactly.
And I think in the end you can also just make it your own, the hobby, in the sense like you don't have to keep up with the Joneses, like we said before, with the museum quality stuff or whatever. If you don't mind a replacement handset or a replacement dial or a cleaned up dial, for instance, then you're free to just wear and enjoy that watch. It's good to know about it because you won't be ripped off buying it. But you don't have to discard it like, oh, that's not the way it's supposed to be. You can make it your own. And similarly, you can also be like our own Mike, for instance, like get these super exotic things in, and then the hobby exists in sourcing parts and fabricating parts and what have you.
Sure.
That's also fine. It's just you can do it your way, and it doesn't have to be the way the Instagram accounts say, basically.
No. And there's nothing wrong with a well done redial, in my opinion. It also depends on what the watch is or was about. I inherited the watch, and the dial was not good anymore. It was smudged and so on. And then I bought a replacement dial, but then it didn't feel like my grandfather's watch anymore.
Yeah.
And then I think, this is not the dial that he looked at. So I got the original dial again and had it reprinted in the best way possible. And it, compared to pictures from before, it's really spot on. So then I think, that's fine. At least it's his dial,
exactly,
and not a replacement dial.
Yeah, and it's just been. I mean, it's like if your car bumper got a scuff or a bad enough scratch, you probably would go and have it repaired, have it repainted, and it's not the original factory paint, but if you get it repaired well, it's still.
I think with vintage car, I'm not that deeply into vintage cars, but I think it's more accepted to have like a repainted vintage Porsche or whatever, resprayed. Then you can have a redial in a watch or a polished case on a watch.
And there's so many of these also, like they call them resto mods on cars, where they take a vintage car that's maybe beyond restoring to its original condition, which maybe you can do, but then you modify it, right? You add like a wide body kit or something like that. Obviously with watches,
it should be reflected in the price, though. So if it's a redial or whatever, it should be reflected in the price.
But I think it also has to do with the fact that especially a few years back, it used to be done quite badly. Where, for instance, with a Seamaster, if it was redialed, it would just be someone painting Seamaster.
You see some that are really just. We'll maybe try and find some examples and put some pictures up, because there's some that truly look like someone's like kid drew the Seamaster logo with a crayon. It's amazing.
There are two companies in Germany that do really well. Kausemann is one. The other one I forgot the name of, but I can look it up.
Yeah.
But there are some companies that are really good at it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And the same goes for polishing. Like the average jeweler or even the average vintage dealer, they'll just try and remove scratches. But if you just do that, then you tend to end up with a lot of meat being taken away and stuff. Exactly. But if you do it, if you know what you're doing, you use the proper equipment, maybe even laser weld some stuff on. That's very controversial among true collectors. But I mean, it is what it is. Then you can really sort of bring back the original lines, and you don't have to harm the watch in the process. So it's, but it really depends, again, like what you're going for.
For sure. Yeah, a little side tangent. How do you feel about the laser welding?
Well, I think I'm not for or against it per se. It's more like it's the way it's done. Like if it's on a museum piece and it's then presented as original or unpolished, then obviously it's wrong. But then it's not the laser welding that's wrong. It's the fraud that's wrong.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
If you have a watch and it's just getting too thin, but you want to make it last another 5 decades, then why not? I mean, but it just depends on the situation.
Because sometimes I see like a GMT Masters that are completely round polished, and I present it as the best thing there is. I would have that laser welded, to be honest, and then enjoy it properly.
There's a great page on Instagram called Watches Spa, and he does laser welding, and those before and after pictures are just, every time I see one on my feed, it's like so satisfying. But though sometimes it can be a little weird, because at times it's like really old Rolexes or whatever, and then you see it with this like brand new like factory like finish, and you think, I don't know if I would be like, if I'm looking at a vintage dial, and then with this like brand new case, I would almost then like wanna like hit it against.
But that's a big issue for me. We've once had a really old GMT Master offered to us at Amsterdam Watch Company. With a laser welded and refinished case.
Right.
And indeed, the bezel, it was a bakelite bezel. It was completely discolored and a little bit cracked. And I think it even had a spider dial.
And the case was like new old stock.
The case was like new old stock. And it was hideous.
Yeah.
I couldn't look at the thing. It was so ugly.
But then it makes no sense.
But then I think you should almost treat it like you're a sculptor or something. You should just go sort of halfway and then maybe re-scratch it a little bit or something.
Yeah.
Just get the structural integrity back, and then
just
relic it a bit, like
guitars.
A guitar. But this was completely off, and we didn't even bid for it because it was a monster.
Exactly.
And then again, that's like if we're talking about like things that have to be sold or whatever. But if you really get something and you know it's going to be yours, as long as you're going to want to own it. Like if you say, I'm going to have this for the rest of my life, then the choice is yours ultimately,
by
right?
all means.
It's a bit like if you want to have it laser welded, go ahead. But in the end, you're going to be the one who owns it, who wears it every day. But then, of course, if you know that it comes to the time to sell it, then you might be playing with a disadvantage. But yeah, for people like me who typically will buy stuff to keep, then it's not so much of an issue. But
do you have a vintage watch on the radar?
Well, I picked one up last week. This little Seiko Lordmatic, the 5606, and I really like that. And this is a bit of a weird one. I don't know if we need to keep going here with this, but I bought two. And one was a project watch, and it was missing the little frame around the date window. And I thought, that's going to be super easy. I'll just find a dial online. No dials online.
Oh, wow.
Anywhere. So I thought, okay, well, yeah, this one was like $90. I found one that was in perfect condition with the original bracelets, or way better condition for $150.
Yeah.
I thought, damn, I should have probably just bought that one right off the bat. But the good thing is, one of them has a better case than the other. One of them has a better handset than the other. They're both from January of '73, and Seiko purists cover your ears. But I'm pretty sure that I'm going to probably get the watchmaker to fuse them into one slightly nicer one, and
and then offer it for sale, man.
And then
new old stock. New old stock.
Exactly, new old stock. No, I want to keep it. I want to wear it, and it's a watch that I like, so I'll take the better from the two. And hey, it's they left the factory at the same time, so it's now they're going to be put together as one, and then I'll sell the shitty one for a really cheap price. No, I won't. I'll give it.
And you?
I can't get over my crush on vintage Submariners. I had yours for a couple of days, of course, and oh man, it's maybe someday, but it's not concrete in my plans at the moment. But
that
someday.
Vintage, like back to the 50s vintage.
Yeah, because I would treat it as a special occasion watch anyway, so that would be fine for me. Cool. Just go for the maximum charm, basically gilt dial, everything the way I want it, and just pull it out on special occasions. And cool.
What I find a bit weird is that we discussed it, I think, last week or last few days. If you look at the 5513, for example, they made it for such a long go that they are still so pricey.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
What about you? Are you looking for anything vintage? Is there anything?
Always on the hunt for a nice vintage constellation, but from the 50s in gold, that would be nice, like a Grand Lux. But they're hard to come by in a good condition, and also with the bracelet and so on. It's difficult. First, I'm always looking also for vintage Rolex and so on. But I just bought a Grand Seiko the other week, so I have to save up again. But let's see. Rolex would be an option. What I really like is the Explorer 2, 1655. But those have become quite expensive as well.
But they've come down a bit, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. But not at the level it was 10 years ago. But will probably not happen. But I'm also eyeballing a 16750. So that's the transitional GMT Master. But you had them with a few different dials. But I like the matte dial with the printed dots instead of the white gold rings.
Yeah, super.
That's a nice one, because I had a few 1675s. 1675. I think from 71. I had one from 77. That's not for me. Okay. And the 16750 is already a little bit indeed transitional, a bit more in between. I like that one. It's a nice one. Yeah,
for me, it's always 16570, of course, white dial, and also I've been looking at old Explorers more and more, and there's something about like a 1016, something like that, where you see a good one and you kind of go, oh, is this?
We were talking about that one. Yeah. That one was in a production for a long time.
Yeah. That's it. But sometimes you look at a good one, you look at a nice picture of an old one, and you go, "Is this maybe all I need? This is the one. This is like a consolidate everything. This is the one watch."
It doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work like that. So no, I know the answer is no, but you still think that, right? So anyway, but cool. So thanks for the chat, guys. Let's get to our comment of the week.
The commands.
The commands, exactly. Which comes from Francis Bacon III.
Oh.
Yeah, that's their username. So anyway, loved this conversation. I'll try playing the YouTube video backwards per RJ's recommendation.
Yes, you should do that.
So we got it in the wrong order
and in half
last week or the week before, and so half speed. I don't know. That might take way too long.
It's extra long enjoyment.
Subliminal messages or something? Or?
No, we
Paul is dead.
We started with our picks for a 15K collection, and we all started with the most expensive one. And we thought actually the way that you might go about this would be the cheaper one first. So we told people to or just said play it backwards. So
Got it.
I don't know how they'll understand it, but hey, maybe I think if you look at the video in the mirror while you play it backwards, then you see the subliminal messages.
Could be.
Perfect. Cool. Thanks, guys. And let us know your thoughts on vintage watches, buying them, any advice that you might have that we might have missed out, and any experiences. We'd love to hear about some of your experiences, good or bad. And of course, be sure to like, subscribe, and join us next week.
And whether you use a safety razor.
Yeah. Tell us how. Tell us. Give us your shaving routine. We'd love to hear it.
And the brand and scent of your soap.
Yes, shaving soap. Very important.
Oh my God.
I got sandalwood. It's really old man vibe.
I have the same.
Yeah.
Next week's episode all about shaving, traditional shaving methods, and of course, join us then for that. We'll see you there.
Dat is van een merk. Met zo'n houten kommetje.